How's it going, everybody? Armor Studio NYC back today with another video. We're going to be painting our Russian KV1 that we built last week. We're going to start off with our favorite surfacer, Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 in black. This stuff is extremely toxic and we're going to have to use some protection here. So grab your respirators, get a glove or two, and let's get to painting. I boosted the air pressure and I turned off this filter that I have for the vapors. That way you could see exactly how much of this paint vapor goes into the air and into your working space. This is still a modeling video, but it's also going to be a workplace safety video as well. So look at all that overspray that you could potentially be breathing in. So I know I haven't expressed the need for safety when it comes to airbrushing, but you definitely want to take a little bit of precaution. Not that it's going to kill you, but it is probably not the best to be breathing in. Anyway, this finishing surfacer I've used on all my models and it's really, really good. I've noticed recently that it's probably better, and by probably better I mean that I've gotten better results from this, but it's better to use this surfacer and apply it very wet onto the model. Before I was just kind of glancing over it, making sure I got a decent enough coverage, but it would kind of look dry, and when it was getting dry it wouldn't really have that nice satin finish that we're looking for, a nice uniformed paint job at the end of the day. So you just want to pretty much crank the air pressure up to, usually I use 20 psi. Here I believe I cranked it up to 30 just so I can show you how much of just stuff is in the air. Also, very, very important to clean out your airbrush after using surfacer. Surfacer is not like paint. It does have a very, very little bit of texture to it. That's why it comes in sizes, i.e. 1200 or 1500. And if you leave that stuff in your airbrush, it will dry and it will really seize up your airbrush worse than any amount of Tamiya acrylic or lacquer or enamel paints. So definitely make sure you take some care in cleaning out your airbrush. Your airbrush will thank you for it, as well as the next time you end up on the bench. This is just a spray test, and if you're new to airbrushing, this is kind of the spray that you would want. A nice, thick, cloudy mist that is very steady and doesn't skip or not spray at all. Yeah, that won't be good. But for cleaning it, you usually want to use the thinner that you used for the paint, or I like to use this airbrush cleaner here. It's not really chemically activated. And as you can tell, we applied it wet and we have our nice satin finish. It preserves our detail and we also get just a nice smooth finish. And all those imperfections, maybe some gluey tide marks or I don't know, greasy fingerprints, aren't shown anymore. So this is a very specific color. It's Russian 4BO, and I also cranked up the air pressure on this one to show you how bad the vapors can be. But this paint is very specific to Russian tanks, primarily in World War II. It's like a yellow-green. Only thing, the yellow-green that they actually sell from Tamiya is too yellow and not enough green. So Russian 4BO, yeah, that's the color right there. It comes out, you might think of this and like, wow, this is absolutely ridiculous paint color, but it's really, really not, I promise. So for our post shading, we're going to use Russian 4BO and we're going to mix it with Tamiya yellow green, and we're going to change our airbrush too. We're going to use our Infinity CR Plus from Harder and Steenbeck. This is, as you know, if you've been a long time visitor of this channel, our detailing brush for us to do really small, minute details that are important. Now, if you look at this brick of just green monstrosity here, you're gonna say, well, I think it needs some extra colors. And you're right. So that is where our post shading is going to come in. And we're just going to mix about 50-50 4BO with the yellow green. And we're just going to spray in a erratic, cloudy pattern. Now, if it looks like we're getting some weird lines or we're getting some inconsistent spray, don't really worry about either one of those, because the paint does blend very well into the premium coat of 4BO, and you won't get as sharp of a contrast. In fact, I do have some parts in this video where I show you the just outrageous difference between a good post shade and not post shaded at all. So as you can see here, we're really getting a lot of lines more than anything. But if you really cloud the texture, as you could tell, it just becomes this cloudy, post-shaded beautifulness of art that we like. And something very interesting happened, and it caught it on video too. Some of the paint was coming out in different hues. Perhaps I didn't mix it as well, but there's definitely some more yellow-green in some areas, definitely some more lighter 4BO in others. I didn't really plan for that to happen, and it ended up being, well, one of the very many happy mistakes that we make while modeling, that it ended up being a good thing and not a bad thing. Again, this is the difference between post-shaded and not shaded at all. Post shading is very important when it comes to armor modeling, because paint does weather itself, and it does fade when it's in the sunlight or snow, rain, extreme heat, extreme cold. Paint does turn different colors. Obviously, you know that just out in your regular lives. And as you can tell here, our paint is actually just as good as our primer. We have very nice satin, but you could tell the difference there between the upper hull, which had no shading at all, and the turret, which has some decent shading that is also starting to dry. So that looks very good. So we're going to continue to grab our infinity, and we're just going to do the same thing, no different, same air pressure, same distance away from the model as we did with our turret. As you could tell, we already post-shaded most of the model. You could tell in the rear there, it does look a lot better than just a brick of one single color. Leaving it a brick of single color is great if you're doing, let's say, a diorama where it's in the factory. And now it's time to paint these tracks. Now these tracks were hit with tons of overspray because remember we boosted the air pressure to show you the toxicity. But we're going to use flat earth and flat black, and we're going to continue to use our harder and Steenbeck Infinity because since it is such a small nozzle, we get to have really precise control over where our paint gets laid down, and we don't have much overspray. In the areas where there are overspray are pretty much areas where weathering occurs. So we're going to, well, if we do have overspray, we're just going to cover it with a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grime, and call it a day. The reason why we used black and brown was because I wanted to make this tank obviously serviceable. As you can tell with the weathering, it's going to make a lot more sense in next week's video. But we didn't want to make the tracks rusty, and we didn't want to make the tracks brand new. So seeing a few reference photos or colored reference photos, which were a little difficult to come by, I noticed that the tracks had a earthy, not quite rusty hue to them. Maybe it was the beginning of oxidation, or maybe they were just stained from going all over types of terrain, which is perfectly fine. And this is, I pretty much established that brown and black would make a pretty good track color. And we want to cover up all that overspray as well. Some of that overspray may be visible when we go to weather, because remember, weathering isn't complete. And we're also not going to make this tank super like really muddy either. We're going to make this lightly weathered, yet still clearly has been through some stuff tank. So here we're going to start painting, or hand painting, brush painting, our metal parts, or parts that are presumed to be metal, so that way we can rust them later. If you're a fan of this channel, you'll know that we always use a medium gray as our base coat for these metal parts, because it does serve as a good base for rust techniques. Yeah, I learned this watching a few other YouTube channels, and I've tried to experiment with other colors, and I just can't achieve the same result as when I use gray. So if you're thinking about rusting up some metal parts, then definitely cover it in gray, and then use your rust washes or rust colored acrylic paints. This Tester's paint is one of my absolute favorite paints. It's metallic silver, and I use it for a lot of steel road wheel tanks. And by a lot, I mean I've only had two, one before this channel was created, and now the Russian KV1. These road wheels were not coated in rubber, they were steel, and obviously when you take metal to metal contact, you're going to get a polished road wheel. So it's not going to be that steel color, it's going to be this really bare polished metal. And this paint just does a really good job of maintaining its sheen, as well as when it dries, it does something to the light. It reflects light in some way that is very, very interesting. And what it ends up looking like is this nice polished steel texture, and we don't have to really do much else except for just slap this onto each road wheel, make sure it's in the teeth of the drive sprocket, and yeah, this is the final result. As you can tell, just it's reflective, but it's not chrome, and that's very, very important here. In this video, we're also going to take a look at maybe some decal tips. I included this as part of the painting process because I feel like everything after this is weathering. So pretty much these decals, they are a little thick. You do have a little bit of a film on them, but don't you worry. You're just going to grab your cup of water. You're going to submerge the decal into the water, just like that. And you're probably going to want to keep it there for about, I say, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes before we use our Mr. Mark Setter. This solution is my favorite. It softens up the decal a lot. Also, prior to doing this, you might want to gloss varnish, just so that way you have a nice smooth surface where you could manipulate and move the decal around. So you put the Mark Setter onto the tank where you're going to place the water decal. You get a good idea of where it's going to sit. You leave it there for literally 30 seconds to a minute, and the decal will begin to soften already. You take some more, and then you place it on top of the decal, and you're good to go. Dry it, and then you're really good to go. And then, very important, we're going to varnish our tank now. So we're going to cover our decals in our favorite VMS satin varnish. The reason why we do this is to prevent silvering. If you have ever done a model and you've put a decal on and it's flaked, or it's changed into like this silvery gray color, you can completely avoid that by varnishing it. So it keeps the decal under a layer of paint, and you won't have to worry about it flaking, and you can weather it and it will never fall off. But that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. Check out these very gratuitous shots of our updated KV1 now that we've painted it. Thank you guys for swinging by the channel again. I love all the support that you guys have given me. It really does mean the world. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week for when we weather this tank. Bye.